travel is a great educational experience in every way. I think, you know, the fact that when you go traveling, the first thing that you learn is how people behave, how other people's cultures are in comparison to your own. I think you become much more broad-minded and accepting of other people being different and wanting to do things in a different way. But it also explains to you why they do it, because of the you know, the place that they live, or the climate, or the set of ingredients that grow regularly there. And you know, if you're observant and you're prepared to keep an open mind and engage in what local people are doing wherever you go, you'll often find out everything you need to know about that place. And for me, you know, having been exposed to that at an early age, I was 11 years old on my first long haul flight on my own, I might add. I was an unaccompanied minor, which was quite interesting. I got treated like royalty, which was fabulous. But what I think it does to you, I think, to be exposed at an early age, it just starts that educational process a lot earlier. Therefore, you know, to go to a country like Dubai that was at the time not developed at all in any way, you know, you're talking about 40 years ago, when it wasn't the sort of metropolis that it is now, and seeing Arabic life, you know, still camels walking down the street, still getting a water taxi across the you know, the creek, getting, you know, paying 1 dirham to hop across and get off the other side and go and walk around the souk, and you know, and the spices in the souk and the colours and the you know, just the scent of fresh ground cumin or za'atar or any of these sort of, you know, ras al hanout, all different kinds of spices. I literally, when I'm opening a packet of spice or I'm opening a container in the kitchen, if I get a waft of certain smells, it'll transport me back to that first time I walked through the souk. So it's sort of, I suppose I'm answering this question, and it's explaining some of the other questions that I know you've got, but they all interlink. And I think because your mind as a younger age is much more, you know, you're like a sponge, aren't you, when you're a lot younger, and everything that you see and experience gets logged. And I was exactly like that. And because I also had my sort of first cooking experience there, using those spices and using ingredients that I'd been and selected the vegetables and selected the fish or the meat and been to collect the spices with either my mum or with another person, you know, it just resonates with you. And I think also because the ingredients were very, very different to what I had seen in the UK, you know, so you're exposed to this sort of Aladdin's cave of colour, noise, smells, and it challenges you, but it also invigorates you, if that makes sense. So I think the fact that you've done that puts you a little bit ahead, and in terms of understanding culture and therefore food culture, it puts you way ahead. Because there's obviously, when I was at college, you know, I went to college after school, and you know, by then I'd been to Dubai and Singapore, and not many people had even been out of the UK unless it was to Spain on holiday for a swimming pool and beach holiday or something like that. So, you know, equally you can learn just as much from going to Spain. You know, these days, that for me, northern Spain and the Basque Country is the gastronomic centre of Europe. I believe, you know. So wherever you go eat where the locals eat. Go to the markets where the locals go. Experience that. You know, drink the drink that they drink with the national dish. The identity of that area, and you will learn very, very quickly about a place and about its people. In terms of the chefing trade alone, travel is still a massively important thing. And the reason I say that is because it opens your mind to why those dishes were created and why those flavor profiles work together. You know, for me personally, I was classically French trained at college, so most of cuisine originates from classic French methods, which is something I still believe strongly in now, certainly in terms of the work we do with the colleges and training. And I think it's very important that those are trained to everybody going through college. But what the travel side does is, and this this can happen whether you're in France, Spain, Switzerland, Germany, Singapore, Dubai. It does, you know, wherever the travel is. What it does is it makes you adapt those culinary skills, if you like, and techniques that you've learned, and you adapt the local ingredients and the local climate, style of food, influences, whatever. You bring that into your food. So you might still cook, you know, a piece of fish in a certain style or the certain technique that you learned from French culinary art, but you might add some, for example, Singapore flavors to it. And you'll often see that in the food that I do. So what happens to a chef is that you do your travels, you do your training, and every kitchen that you work in, you take little pieces of that chef or that style that you, wherever you're working, whatever you're experiencing, and that becomes part of you. Obviously, you leave behind the bits that you don't like. And as I always say, you can learn as much from things that you don't like as from things that you do really love. And what a chef does is he will embrace the things that he loves about Dubai, about Singapore, about North America, about France, about the Basque Country, whatever they are, and they resonate and stick with them. And then they adapt that to their own cookery style, whatever they've learned and adapted over those years. And that becomes his repertoire. And that's what's happened exactly for me. And I suppose I would urge any young chef at some point to do the travel thing, to work abroad, to work with another culture, to work with another style, another set of techniques. And then at some point you bring that back, hopefully. Obviously I'm slightly biased, but I want young chefs to go away and experience these things and then come back to Liverpool to ply their trade, to make us a more cosmopolitan, more international feel city, and obviously drive standards. It's all about the pursuit of quality at the end of the day for me. So, you know, that's the long answer, but the short answer is I honestly don't believe that a chef who hasn't traveled will be as good as somebody who has. That is a genuine answer. And if you look at a lot of the great chefs that not just Great Britain has produced, but international chefs, nearly all of them have traveled abroad. Obviously, you would think maybe the likes of the great French chefs like, you know, Alain Ducasse or, you know, Joël Robuchon, who have become sort of international brands. They would say that they learnt everything in France, and then they brought that with them around the world. So, you know, I think France and Italy and Spain would probably have a different view on that. But I think from a British point of view, I think it's really important. Yeah, it's slightly different for people coming from France and Italy and Spain, where the food culture is probably a lot more established and older and more mature, I would say, the culture is. Whereas Great Britain, although it's fabulous and we have amazing food culture, it's still, relatively speaking, in its infancy. It's still developing incredibly, but it's still, you know, relatively behind. I know that sounds a bit funny to say when you look at, you know, 3 Michelin star chefs in the country now that are producing unbelievable food, but it's true. You know, the strength and depth of our food culture is still developing in comparison. So I think, you know, I was 11 years old. The UK was a very different place in terms of food and drink at that time. So it would have been, you know, 70, was it 77? I would have been there, 1977. God, that seemed like a hell of a long time ago. Um, and of course now, the way the world is now, and for people of Harry's age traveling, you know, the world is a smaller place, obviously, until recent occurrence where nobody's traveling at all, of course, now, which is very, very difficult. But those days will return. And I think, you know, what was happening in Dubai was it was becoming its own little melting pot of the Middle East, if you like. It was a bit like, you know, you've got Arabic culture, you've got colonial culture. So you had, you know, British, Australia, New Zealand, American in there. You also had Indian, Pakistani, Persian, Iraqi, all sorts of different cultures and food. Bangladeshi, actually, all sorts of different foods. So in a way, Dubai was becoming its own little melting pot, its own little mini New York of the Middle East. And that's what you've seen is obviously you add large sums of money into that from the oil, from the Arab sheikhs and the emirs, and they have created a Middle Eastern New York now in every way, haven't they? With the skyscrapers and there's nothing you can't do in Dubai now, and it's and there is a restaurant from every nationality. There is a restaurant for every day of the week. You know, it's exploded into this thing. But I was there at the very beginning of that. You know, my father was there to create the container port in terms of shipping, and they were still bringing in lamb from New Zealand and you know, beef from Argentina and all the rest of it. So it was very much, it was just the start of Dubai's development. So I think if Harry was going traveling now and just looking at food culture and how things operate, he would see a very different Dubai now. And obviously he's just been to Singapore with me, and you know, Singapore is the New York of of Southeast Asia. So, but the thing, and I will say this though, the thing about Dubai and Singapore is that they do have their own identity. I think less so in Dubai. I think it's become more of a global city now, whereas Singapore has been able to become that global city and that financial center, but yet still keep its identity in terms of, you know, is it about going and having chili crab or satay or butter chicken, you know, and it's got some national dishes there that when you go to Singapore, you've got to try. And of course, the combinations of flavors in Singapore are even more diverse. You know, you've got Malay, you've got Indian, you've got, again, the colonial, massive Chinese influence, obviously. Then you've also got Japanese, Thai. I mean, it's just incredible the diversity of flavors there. And of course, the produce is incredible. And yet, both countries and both cities have to import quite a lot of their produce, because Dubai obviously is pretty much apart from the fish and the local meat, which is, you know, sheep and goat meat. Everything else is imported because there's not much that's able to grow there without really expensive irrigation. So they were always bringing in lots of you know, meat, vegetables, etc. from other countries. Singapore is you know, nearly 4 million people on the size of an island, the size of the Isle of Man. So again, even the fishing is not big enough to look after the population there. So they get a lot from Indonesia, from Malaysia, and the same with the vegetables and meat. Again, so it has its own challenges, but the influence and the way they cook is just second to none. And of course, in Singapore, they get out of bed in the morning, and the whole day revolves around the meals and who's, you know, are you going to go and eat in the hawker center and have chili crab, or are you staying at home and cooking tonight? If so, who's going to the market? You know, it's a different way. It is a way of life rather than, I think in Britain we still have, unless you're going for a restaurant meal, we still have this thing where it's classed as fuel rather than a true pleasure of life, and we don't place enough importance even now, I don't think, on food and drink. And it is changing. You know, people's obsession for the knowledge of food and drink is changing. But again, I would still say we're a little bit behind some of the places that we're talking about now. Certainly, even in Europe, you know, the way of life is very much to go to the market, buy the fruit and veg and fish and meats for the day. Somebody will be at home preparing, and then they'll all come round and sit around the table and eat together in the evening. You know, that's still the preferred route. Now, modern life doesn't always allow for that, but you know, we tend to only really do that on a Sunday if we're lucky, don't we? You know, our working lives don't allow for that on a daily basis. So it's quite interesting, and that's part of food culture, part of understanding food culture, isn't it? Singapore's interesting because it does have the feel of a city at pace. You know, it does feel like everything's quite urgent, and you know, they're dashing around doing stuff, and so you do get people grabbing things on the go, but their culture of food is very much revolves around the hawker centres, whereby you'll have a central seating area, and then round the outside are all sorts of different stalls and people who specialise in, you know, one stall will just do fresh juices made from watermelon, pineapple, kiwi fruit, whatever. So the one stall will just be doing all the drinks. One stall will be a seafood specialist, so they'll be doing chili crab and skate wing and prawns or something like that. They'll just do that. Then you have one stall just doing the butter chicken and rice, which is their sort of national dish. Then you'll have one stall just doing satay, and so it goes on around. And then what happens is you sit in the center with a group of friends or a family, or obviously it attracts a lot of tourists as well. But you'll literally sit. Somebody will go off and buy the drinks. Somebody will go off and, oh, I'll go and get the satay. He'll go and get the chili crab. And what happens is you get the specialists. So you've got the best satay that you can get. You've got the best chili crab. You've got the best, and you sit there and you've got your own little banquet laid out on the table. And then somebody comes along, clears it all away when you're finished, and off you go. And it's a lovely way of eating, actually. And of course, again, it's dictated by the weather. A lot of people like to go out in the evening when it's a bit cooler, and sit outside and have a tiger beer and sort of tell stories, and it all revolves around food and drink, which is fantastic. So that's a lovely way of doing it. But they do, during the day, they do grab and go. Equally, they have some amazing formal restaurants and obviously hotels and things like that are just 5-star plus. It's just incredible standards. So it's very, very interesting how it's all developed there, and it's busy all the time, never stops. It's just incredible. The thing about my mum and dad was, part of my dad's job when he was in Singapore was, he had to make sure that all the crews and all the ships had enough cargo on them, containers. So he was doing deals with big businesses who wanted to ship things around the world, and then he would also have to entertain crews and senior people from his company when they came into port. So the house, to be honest, was like a hotel or a restaurant anyway, because every day there seemed to be like another group of people coming through, and he had his own bar set up in the house. So he was a great one for being mine host. He used to love entertaining and pouring drinks and telling stories and charming people, which he was very good at. And my mum was a good cook, but also was good in terms of hospitality. And she was in the NHS, as was her career. She was a nurse and a nursing sister, and she would be the most selfless person you'll ever meet. She would look after everybody else, even to the point where she was falling in a heap. She would always be the one looking after everybody. So, and she was a good cook. She had a limited repertoire, as she would say herself, but what she made was very nice. So, of course, when I became interested, she encouraged that. And the way it is over in Singapore, especially in his position, he was able to have some help in the house, because literally it was like that. We were entertaining so often. And I'd be happier getting the stuff ready with her during the day and doing the shopping and the chopping and getting it all ready. And then being around in the nighttime as well to enjoy the party. So I got the best of both worlds, but I did learn a lot of stuff from, the first one I learned, I think you've seen in the book, was a guy, an Indian chef in Dubai, that taught me chicken biryani. It was the first dish I ever cooked properly for a group of people, which was my own birthday party. And if I'm honest, I got more pleasure out of the cooking part and being in the kitchen and having a crafty beer with the chef than I did at my own party, which which still makes me laugh now, actually. And it's always gone on from there. So the dishes in Singapore I love, and I think I told you the story that the first time I went to Singapore at 13, 14, I had some chicken satay cooked by a little 11-year-old guy on the side of the street, on a curb with a barbecue, cooking satay and selling 6 sticks for $5 or whatever it was. And still to this day, it's some of the nicest flavors I've ever had, and the little peanut dipping sauce and little chunks of cucumber with the bamboo sticks to eat it, and then a little glass of tiger beer to wash it down. You're not going to go far wrong with that, So it's amazing. You can still learn from things like that. And still to this day, the first thing I do when I get to Singapore, even when I've been over on my own to cook, is I find a hawker centre that does fresh satay and tiger, and I'll sit there and I always toast my mum and dad and have a little satay there, you know. So it's become a sort of tradition, and that goes back to our flavour triggering memory and triggering emotion and nostalgia, doesn't it? You know, it's that same, how it gets ingrained and embedded in you, you know. I think Harry's got that now. Harry and Helen have now experienced that, and I think that's part of their thing, and they can't wait to go back again now. So I would say that yes, we could replicate the flavors of the satay, and we cook it on the barbecue outside, and it would taste wonderful, but it still wouldn't be the same because you're not in Singapore. So I that's how I would feel. I think because that's a very strong emotion and a strong memory for me. But what I hope is when I'm cooking, and then this is genuinely, this is where I always talk about food is about an extension of your own personality, and it's a gift from the chef. There's a little piece of your heart on each plate. And what I hope, if when I'm cooking something, if I say, for example, I was cooking satay, I would want to somehow translate the emotion that it gives me and the pleasure that it gives me into the flavor in those little sticks of satay as I'm cooking it and giving it out. So maybe people would remember, oh, well, that's the time we went to see Porky Askew at wherever. It probably wouldn't, it's not a restaurant dish for the art school, but it's something that I would do at a festival or street food, or, you know, if I was in Birkenhead Park or I was doing the Bordeaux Wine Festival, I'd certainly do it there. And I've done things like that where I've introduced a little bit of Singapore or a little bit of Dubai, and I've put it on the pier head at in Liverpool, and people still talk to me about that. So I know that has happened, but of course to them, it's the memory of the Bordeaux Wine Festival. To me, it's a memory of Dubai or Singapore that I'm passing on. Do you see what I mean? And that's how even when I'm writing a menu for the art school, I'm thinking, how is that going to be received? How will that resonate with them and want them to come back and taste that again at the art school? What are the details that we can put in to make them feel so, you know, so energized and so emotional about the food and the connection? So I suppose you can see how this has evolved now, can't you? I suppose I'm showing you the whole deck of cards today. I don't know why, but I am. The thing that never ceases to amaze me every time I go there, and every time I think of that, and I think it's the ambition of this little tiny nation. Because as I say, it's an island that's not bigger than the Isle of Man. It's got nearly 4 million people living on it. It has zero national debt. It builds things of world class for fun. It just seems to keep evolving and emerging, and it keeps its sort of its compass, its moral compass remains the same, and it, you know, it's ultra clean, ultra friendly, very little crime, and I think it's almost become like a model vision or a model society. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have any problems. It does have some problems, of course it does, but I just think, you know, you feel like you're going to something that it is about the pursuit of quality, everything that they do, and that really appeals to me. You know, I love things with ambition, and I love things with drive, and things that don't get sidetracked for petty reasons. You know, that sometimes you do have to bulldoze the way through and be strong about it for the greater good. And I think they've been amazing in that. You know, I think as a city and as a nation, they are absolutely incredible for that. And I also love the fact that they adore the colonial history and the connection between the UK and Singapore. You know, in terms of the expat community and places like Singapore Cricket Club and all the places that I have fond memories of. I just think they've become institutions, and you know, it's such a great example of how you know, your quintessential British attitude can merge with the dynamism and the just incredible ability of Asia to create these places. I mean, it's just a perfect harmony, I think. So it's hard to say just one thing, but you can see that what I'm saying is I'm a massive admirer of what they've achieved and how they do things. And you know, just to go and walk around the city is a joy in itself. But it's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal place.